This reporter, his name's Nick Scow. Nick Scow's going to be a name you're going to remember in a bit, because meet with Nick. Nick doesn't do a story on this politician, but he ends up doing a story on another campaign issue that I was working on. So he did that. Then I gave him another idea, did that story. And so to see these stories on stories that I'm working on, things that I care about, community, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I was still a junior at the time, not going into my senior year. So throughout that summer since this summer of 2000, from my junior year into my senior year, I kept feeding the OC Weekly more and more story ideas. Finally, the election comes about, and I think the editor at the time got so disgusted with me giving him so annoyed, not disgusted, so annoyed with me giving him all these story ideas. She's like, you know what? You've been giving us all these great story ideas, and my reporters have been doing these stories. Why don't you do a story? And I told him, no, I don't want to do a story because I'm not a reporter, I'm a filmmaker. I'm not going to do this. But he said, no, you know your stuff enough. I think you could really do a story, and I'll pay you $100. I'm like, hell yeah, I want $100. So I did my first story right after the election. It was a story about how the Democratic Party in Orange County was using this former California governor to scare Latinos into voting Democrat. So I finished the story. And I finally, all this time I've never talked to the editor. We've just been trading emails. So I finally decided to call the guy and just thank him personally. Thank you for accepting this story. Thank you for publishing and paying me $100 for this little story. So we started talking on the phone. He's like, yeah, you're a really great writer. How old are you? And at the time I was 21, so I'm like, I'm 21 years old. He's like, what, 21 years old? You're right, like a 39-year-old man. In other words, no, he was saying that as a compliment. He's like, you have this really great voice. You have this great storytelling talent, and you have a nose for news, and I have the perfect story for you. I hear that in Anaheim, there's a lot of lucha libre matches, lucha libre, mask wrestling, Mexican wrestling. So none of my reporters, though, know how to speak Spanish. So how about if you go out there and you report on this for me? And I said, yeah, sure, because I've actually been going to these lucha libre matches most of my life. So I go out there, and my first story was about 600 words. So I go out there and I report something. I write like an 800-word essay, and then I turn it into him. And then he says, no. And then I tell him, you should get one of your bigger reporters, one of your more experienced reporters, one of your better reporters, to do a bigger story, because this is a really good story. Like, I don't mind serving as a translator for you, but you should put somebody with more talent on this. And he said, no, you've got the talent, you go out there and do it. Instead of 800 words, let's make it 1,500 words, and I'll put it on the cover. So I'm like, okay, and I'll pay you $500. I'm like, hell yeah, $500 instead of 100 for something I already know? Why not? So I go up there, I publish, I do this story about Mexican wrestling, and then at the same time, he tells me, like, are you interested in writing about food? I'm like, not really, I'm not a food guy. He's like, well, we don't have a food writer, so I'm always looking for new writers to write about food. So you should go review this Thai restaurant, and I'll pay you $100 for doing this review, and you get to eat for free because after you turn in your receipts, you get reimbursed. So I'm like, all right, sure, I'll try it. Free meal, get some money out of it, why not? So my first story, as I said, came out in November after the election. So my second and third story actually came out on my birthday, February 2001. I was 22 years old, so I have the cover story, and I have this food story. So by then, I started realizing, like, wow, I could maybe make a career out of this. I could write something and get paid for it and write about things that I like. Maybe I should start looking into this. So I started feeding him more story ideas, but by this time, in February, I had already been accepted to grad school at UCLA in Latin American Studies. I still thought I wanted to be a professor of film, but as 2001 goes along, I started writing more stories, and so by the time that I entered school, September of 2001, by then I knew I didn't want to go to grad school. I wanted to become a reporter. But there was a big problem. I didn't have any experience as a reporter. Sure, I had a couple of stories, but that was nothing. I never went to journalism school. I never wrote anything other than that angry letter to the editor. I had no experience at all. So I tell the editor, his name was Will Swain. So I tell Will, hey, I want to be a reporter. What should I do? He said, well, keep pitching story ideas to us, but if you really want to be a reporter, you're going to have to take all the criticism